Oliver Studd, the CEO and founder of Valhalla Network, and thank you again for joining us on our first ever event in London, and the support that you've given us. So my talk today is just really going to be an introduction to who we actually are, what we're doing and the benefit we're going to bring to people and our progress to date. And then after my talk, our head of strategy, Ben Sen, will give a brief talk as well on DeFi and CBDCs and what central bank digital currencies actually are and the risk that they bring to all of us. So I don't mind if people, I'm going to trip over, if people want to stay standing up to get their drinks and stuff, but if we can just have some quiet on the right, that'd be awesome, thank you. So, I realise there's no slides, but I've got my laptop here to keep me on track so I don't spend 10 minutes waffling. So the problems today in society that we face, like Richard Werner alluded to, there's a serious misunderstanding of the role banks play in societies. They are thought of as more like middlemen, like Del Boy. They're thought of as moving money from one person's account to another. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of it. Anyone who studied economics have heard this. Luckily, I didn't personally study it, so I didn't get taught a load of lies for 3 years. You get taught that banks are financial intermediaries. This is absolute bollocks. Banks are not financial intermediaries. They're more like wizards. They create money out of thin air. Their banking licenses give them the ability to use a magic wand and create new fictitious money. And this is a serious misunderstanding because this credit creation that they do impacts our everyday life and it impacts the businesses that thrive, which industries do well. The second serious issue today is the importance of small businesses, and people don't really understand it. If you've got banks that create credit, and then suddenly they are not creating it for small businesses, but are aiming more towards big businesses, small businesses are going to struggle. Small businesses take up about 2/3 of employment in society. So if banks aren't lending money to small businesses and they're struggling, you're going to get increased bankruptcies, increased unemployment, and overall increased inequality. Furthermore, small businesses rely on banks for funding because they're unable to access funding from other means, such as issuing bonds, which big businesses can do. So there's a serious need for banks that actually support small businesses. Another key element is that despite all this fact and the fact that big businesses aren't looking at small businesses, the bank numbers are decreasing in society. The banking system is becoming more concentrated. Over time, across the whole world, big banks are buying up small banks. Not because the small banks are doing well, not because they're not doing well, it's because they are doing well that they're buying them. They're looking at them saying, this is a good bank, it has a good business model, it's doing well, let's acquire it, but then suddenly it's part of a bigger bank, and no longer is a small bank doing what it was originally doing, lending to small businesses. So as bank numbers decline, small businesses struggle even more to get bank funding. A survey Local First did last year, interviewing over 100 small businesses in Norfolk, found that over 2/3 don't even approach their bank to ask for a bank loan, because not only is it the fear of being rejected, but the hassle of applying for a loan in the first place. Furthermore, the big banks are lending increasingly for unproductive purposes, like Professor Richard Werner alluded to. This is like for mortgages, for example. It's unproductive, and what it ends up doing is it has recurring boom-bust cycles over time. Boom-bust cycles only benefit bankers and central bankers, really. It does not benefit any of us, and it doesn't benefit small business owners especially. These recurring boom-bust cycles will continue as banks continue pumping unproductive credit into the system. Because if you create credit for unproductive purposes, and then you suddenly turn off the supply, you suddenly get this bust that goes down because there's no more money there, everything is overvalued, so suddenly all the asset markets collapse. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is simple: creating Valhalla Network, creating a network of small, locally focused community banks. Not only are we creating these decentralized front end of banking, but we're also decentralizing the back end. We're democratizing finance by allowing anyone to be a governance token holder. We're effectively creating a banking system that's owned by the people and is operating for the people. Another benefit we bring is every single community bank that we set up acts as a hub for local economic growth. And a portion of the dividends that these banks create, because the banks are profitable, the portion of these dividends are then reinvested back into local social and charitable initiatives. So how are we actually going to do this through Valhalla Network? So there's 3 key elements to us. The first is the DAO, the actual foundation that's governed by token holders. Now, for any of you who doesn't understand what a DAO is, a decentralized autonomous organization, It's effectively a company that's owned by thousands of people, the thousands of token holders. And these token holders can propose and make proposals on-chain and then vote on-chain, and everything is transparent. You haven't got a select few individuals making all the decisions that can easily lead to corruption and stuff not going to plan. It's better if everything is transparent and everyone is making the decisions together. Furthermore, it allows everyone to benefit from it if you have the people owning the system. Then we have the phase one. So we actually will execute our solution in 2 phases. Phase one, the setup of a specialist for-profit bank. Professor Richard Werner and I devised a bank model that generates profits much quicker than a normal bank. It will generate a 5-year ROI for the foundation of over 500%. Now this bank will generate its profits much quicker, meaning the foundation and governance token holders are more early supported. Phase 2 is then the establishment of a network of community banks. And the community banks will then lend to small businesses only. So more information about phase 1. So phase 1 will be established in the EEA. It will have an ROE of almost 25%, and it creates a positive real-world cash flow that flows to the DAO. The dividends flow from the bank up to the bank holding company, and then from the bank holding company to the DAO and the governance token holders that then vote on what to use the funds for. After that's up and running and the DAO is receiving the dividends, we'll start phase 2, the establishment of community banks all over the world. We'll start in Europe because we understand it more, but then as we become more decentralized over time, the governance token holders can vote on where we start up new banks, where we invest money to set up a new community bank to help another community. Each bank would have created circa 5,000 new jobs in 10 years, and it would have also invested significant amount into community initiatives. It is small business-centric banking. The banks are relationship-focused. They have bankers on the ground that understand the small businesses in their area. They can actually have that relationship with them so they know how best to support them. The big banks don't have that relationship. If a big bank is nice enough to give any relationship to a small business, it's a simple phone in and you get through to one of maybe 6 or 7 people your relationship support that you speak to. And that's after you've gone through various automated systems where you've got to click a button and you want to try and get through to someone to help you. It is not relationship focused, whereas community banks are. They only deal with the small businesses in their local area. Now the team, comprised of obviously Professor Richard Werner, our chair, who is one of the most experienced in the industries, with everything I said to start with being the inventor of quantitative easing, the author of the Japanese #1 bestseller Prince of the Yen, and been working in the space for over 30 years. I'm going to have to get used to this cable. Other people in the team have extensive experience across regulatory and compliance as well. With Mark Jolly here as well, who was Deputy Head of Compliance at another bank in London and is now working as our Head of Compliance for Valhalla Network. Our advisory board also consists of the number 2 of GLS Bank, I think it is. Number 2 there, and also other tech experts such as Makoto Takamisha, who is the CEO of Sora, who's an absolute genius in the space. Now, our success to date, we had an oversubscribed seed round when we launched in January, and then in February and March, we quickly raised about 7.5 million euros. We're now working on finishing and closing our Series A, which is about 10.5 million euros, which we expect to do in the next few months. And then we'll launch Series B next year, where we'll raise about another 11 million euros, which is our private amount, which is about 22 million euros in total. Since then, we've been working on the bank license application already, looking at the regulations that are involved in where we're applying and choosing the best jurisdiction to do so. So, why are we actually raising so much money? Now, unlike most startups which raise money, they don't need to raise 22 million to start up. That's a huge amount of money. However, if you're applying for a banking license, you do need to raise that. Why? Because you need tier 1 equity. The bank regulators require us to go to them and show that we have tier 1 equity so that we can even apply for a license. If we don't have that, they're not even going to care, they're not even going to consider us. So we need to have that money there. That gives us a very unique position in the market where we can say to investors that over 80% of the money we raised is just for tier 1 equity, it's just collateral. And if for some reason we had to close down and we couldn't continue with our operations, over 80% of the money that we raised is actually able to be returned to investors before we get our bank license. The roadmap, well, like I said, we started in January. We're now looking at closing our Series A, and we're now working on our bank license application, which we expect to complete in the next 6 to 8 months. We've had fantastic support from our investors, with many of our investors here tonight. So I appreciate everything they've done to support us to date. And it's not just, some people see investors as just a money source. It isn't. For us, we have a very close relationship with several of our investors. They help us in many ways, not just financially. Oops, I'm going to knock that over in a minute. We are also looking at launching our Phase 1 bank the start of 2024. And the DAO solution should also be live end of next year. That's when the tech will be in place and people will start voting on proposals. And then Phase 2, after Q1 2024, Phase 2 will then start being worked on. Once we've got our first bank license, the team will then start looking at Phase 2 and where to set up the community banks. If the right conditions exist, communities everywhere can thrive. Valhalla Network can bring these conditions.